in the interests of time, because it's already, we're 5 minutes over our schedule, which always gets my heart racing if we're over schedule. So I think we need to move on. So we're here now, we've got the final panel of the day, and then we're going to have some wrap-up remarks. So thank you for rejoining us after the break. I'm very grateful. We're going to start with, again, an address from MEPs, a short video addressing us, and then we'll move on to the final panel. We're going to have a presentation. We'll be talking about lung cancer in the final panel. But now, over to the MEPs.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation to participate in the European Cancer Forum. It is of the utmost importance to have events like this to broadly discuss all health-related issues concerning cancer, and this is an important disease for the world and particularly for the EU, and we have seen that commitment from the current European Commission on this topic. We have that 30 to 50% of these cancers or the deaths from this disease could be avoidable, and hence it is important to openly discuss how we can improve prevention, primordial, primary, secondary, tertiary prevention, but also how can we develop better diagnostic techniques, better research, better treatments, and how to make them accessible for our citizens, for our patients, and also how to follow up on these matters. This is an important topic, which is a very, very broad disease that has many, many components, and it's quite crucial that we come together and discuss about this in forums like this one. So I wish you all very good work.
Une très grande nouvelle pour des milliers de citoyens européens, le Parlement va s'emparer de la question du cancer. La question du cancer qui nous touche toutes et tous de près et qui est un problème qui se traite au niveau des États membres, mais aussi au niveau de l'Europe. Nous avons besoin de l'échelle européenne sur des sujets de prévention comme ceux qui sont traités au niveau du Green Deal, la pollution atmosphérique, la bonne alimentation, l'élimination des polluants. Nous avons besoin de l'échelle européenne pour la recherche et pour les larges consortiums de chercheurs venus de tous pays européens. Nous aurons besoin de l'échelle européenne pour évaluer les médicaments, pour fixer ensemble un prix juste et accessible et pour lutter contre les pénuries. Nous aurons besoin de l'échelle européenne chaque fois qu'une maladie est trop rare pour pouvoir être prise en charge à l'échelle d'un seul pays. C'est en particulier le cas des cancers des enfants. Et nous aurons besoin de l'échelle européenne pour travailler ensemble à la réinsertion sociale, professionnelle, assurantielle et affective des patients. Nous allons gagner contre le cancer en Europe.
Great, thank you. So, with that introduction, again, it's an inspiring introduction to move us forward. We're going to talk, I know we've talked a lot about inequalities, we've talked a lot about the access is poor in some areas, in some geographies. We're going to get very specific now and talk about those issues, but specifically in lung cancer. So, as ever, we're going to have some real hard facts first that have been compiled by the Economist Intelligence Unit, and then we're going to go into our panel discussion. So let's have the hard facts and the new research that we'll be launching from Mary Bussell here, from an associate at the EIU. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is a real pleasure, and I am delighted to be able to share with you some preliminary data that we will be publishing in the not too distant future. Oh, yeah, this one. Great, thanks. Thank you. Our work examines the current situation in 27 countries. So the darker countries, there are 11 darker countries, which were in the first phase of our research, and that report was published at the World Conference on Lung Cancer on the 10th of September of last year. And the lighter shaded countries are the additional 16 countries, which brings us to a full 27 countries. And yet we are also studying the issue of lung cancer in a further 9 countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Our initiative seeks to expand knowledge and foster debate around priorities for improving care in each country. The aim is to explore how differing policy environments may partially drive the variation in lung cancer outcomes, to inform policymakers, public health authorities, and society as a whole on the most urgent issues confronting lung cancer and suggest a platform for action. So I'm with the Economist Intelligence Unit, which is a sister company of that newspaper, and we help countries, we help governments, we help corporations understand how we've got to where we are today and to help navigate the path to the future. Despite recent progress in detection and treatment of lung cancer, outcomes and mortality rates have only improved slowly in Europe. Lung cancer kills as many people as breast, colon, and prostate cancer combined in Europe. So of the top 4 cancers in Europe, if we look at the pie chart over on the left, 20% of people who die of cancer in Europe will die of lung cancer. Everything on this chart, everything in red, just in case you can't read it in the back, everything in red is lung cancer, everything in purple is breast cancer, everything in that mustardy yellow color is colon cancer, and everything in blue is prostate cancer. So breast, colon, and prostate cancer, the number of people who die of those 3 cancers equals the number of people who die of lung cancer in Europe. Then if we look over at the DALYs, disability-adjusted life years, I don't know how many of you use this public health measure in your work, but it is a very helpful way to compare overall health and life expectancy. It measures the overall disease burden by calculating the number of years of life lost due to ill health, morbidity, disability, and early mortality. Now, if you take those 2 charts, the pie chart and the DALY chart, the mortality chart and the DALY chart, tell me how we come to the bar chart in the bottom left-hand corner, which is the spend to disease burden ratio of the top 4 cancers in Europe. And this is all we spend on lung cancer, given the burden that it imposes on people in this part of the world? Our framework gathers national level data to enable a cross-national comparison. However, some countries, and I'm looking at some of you there, do not organize their data at this level. Some countries have fully devolved health systems, while others allow particular decisions to be made at a local level. We gathered information on 17 different indicators, which we grouped into 5 domains. So lung cancer is a strategic priority, lung cancer as a public health issue, lung cancer as a race against time, because indeed it is, just as I'm racing against the clock here. Lung cancer is at a crossroads, lung cancer being a focus for research, and all of these domains and all of the indicators that make up these domains are geared to understanding the situation in each country because we want to improve outcomes for lung cancer patients. We find patches of good practice throughout the outcomes, throughout the countries that we have studied, yet no single country or no single domain scores highly across the board. This research included country-based workshops, which were just so impactful. And it allowed us to dive more deeply into the issues within each country. We spoke with clinicians, nurses, patient organizations, policymakers, politicians, a whole gamut, payers, a whole gamut of people. In all of the workshops that I've been involved with, I met with over 200 of these key specialists. And in conferences like today, other speaking engagements and presentations that I've done, I've met with over 1,000 stakeholders. This is just really incredible because the momentum for change is here. In Finland, the Director General of the Institute for Health and Wellbeing announced at the lung cancer workshop in Helsinki that cancer is going to receive a much higher priority in her country. So it's just thrilling. Lung cancer as a strategic priority. Well, what goes into it? This domain focuses on the degree to which lung cancer is a focus in each country. So we first of all look at national cancer control plans, which are produced by the government's Ministry of Health and help us to demonstrate that a country recognizes the need to prioritize cancer in their country. Shockingly, 52%, so this is the first time I'm showing any of this data for 27 countries, so I'm really excited. I hope you are too. 52% of the countries have not updated their national cancer control plan within the past 5 years. And you're asking, why 5 years? Well, because thanks to medical innovations, scientific development, and all the new technologies that are coming, and treatments as well, things change rapidly. So we look at a 5-year interval as a reasonable time frame for national cancer control plans to be updated. 15% of the countries that we looked at, that's 4 countries, do not yet have a national cancer control plan. I'm excited to tell you that they're working on producing them, so it's really good to know that that is in process, but it's really important to know that they're not quite yet there. We also look at lung cancer clinical guidelines, which are produced by the medical specialists and help to establish national benchmarks, which can aid in the alleviation of variations in care. They need to be a comprehensive and useful guide to clinical practice. Early detection is vital to improve outcomes. Yet screening remains a controversial issue for many of our countries. But this is no less controversial for other diseases than it is for lung cancer, but it is a big issue. Indeed, 27% of the guidelines that we looked at in the different countries do not discuss screening. But lung cancer screening studies such as the Nelson trial, the lung cancer screening trial, the International Early Lung Cancer Action Program, and Manchester's Lung Health Check are all showing how early detection can ensure earlier identification of the disease with the opportunity to improve outcomes. Shared decision-making acknowledges an individual's autonomy, enabling a patient to have a role in his or her care. This is really important. 44% of the countries that we looked at do not discuss shared decision-making in their clinical guidelines. Again, a missed opportunity. Supportive and palliative care, and we talk about them together as supportive and palliative care, because as we've already heard earlier today, palliative care generally refers to more of end-of-life issues. But this is important, it should be an important component of care from the moment a person receives a diagnosis of lung cancer. So supportive and palliative care is not discussed in 7% of the countries that we looked at. Lung cancer is most certainly a race against time. This domain addresses diagnosis, fast tracking, and rapid referral to treatment. How well do countries address the need for speed? While we recognize that guidelines cannot guarantee the delivery of care that they describe, they can establish standards for a country and hold providers to account and help to alleviate regional discrepancies. Finding effective ways to utilize technology to ensure that complicated algorithms can be followed for patients living in remote regions is important for many countries. Centralization of care, particularly in diagnostic and surgical treatment, could also be helpful. But more research is needed to understand the challenges faced within the individual countries. And time is most certainly of the essence. Guidelines must ensure that a person suspected of having lung cancer is fast-tracked for diagnostic testing that is delivered within specific timeframes. So in our study, 40% of guidelines do not include the fast tracking of people suspected of having lung cancer for treatment. And 40% of guidelines do not include specific timeframes within which the diagnostic testing should occur. Lung cancer guidelines can help to improve awareness in primary care, ensuring that time is not wasted. In lung cancer, there is no room for complacency. When someone has received that diagnosis of lung cancer, the guidelines must specify steps to be taken rapidly and refer him or her to secondary or tertiary care. In our study, 56% of the guidelines did not include rapid referral to secondary or tertiary care. This is really a real missed opportunity. We are looking for comprehensive lung cancer clinical guidelines because these are the documents that are top of mind for the clinicians when they are delivering care. Instead of including fast tracking within timeframes and rapid referral to secondary or tertiary care in their national guidelines, 3 countries approach it somewhat differently. In Hungary, it's mandated by law. In the Russian Federation, it's mandated by government policies. And in Italy, it's mandated by national agreements. The public health domain assesses the level of awareness and prevention in a country, along with the existence and involvement of patient organizations. Patient organizations focused specifically on lung cancer can play an important role in a country by increasing the awareness of the disease and ensuring that the patient's needs are heard by policymakers, decision makers, and health systems, as well as the clinicians that they are in touch with every day. 44% of the countries in our study do not have a lung cancer specific patient organization. Involving patient organizations in the development of national clinical guidelines and the HTA process can help to identify issues that may be overlooked by health professionals, can influence the development of recommendations from a patient and a carer perspective, and emphasize the importance of including shared decision-making and psychological assessment, because this disease has a unique psychological burden. 67% of the countries in our study do not include patient organizations in the development of national clinical guidelines. Now, because there were a number of countries that did not have lung cancer specific patient organizations, in these 2 areas we looked at patient organizations as a whole. 56% of countries do not include patient organizations in the HTA process, and this speaks to some of the issues I think that we were covering in the session before. I'm supposed to have something come up. There we go. Lung cancer must be at the top of Europe's agenda. We need to have improvements made in strategic planning. National cancer control plans should be regularly updated, including an implementation plan, and, if you'll allow me to say it again, including an identified and dedicated source of funding. A plan without a dedicated source of funding is a dream. national clinical guidelines need to be comprehensive and establish national benchmarks to eliminate regional discrepancies. We have no time for complacency. Early detection is vital if we're looking to improve outcomes. We must incorporate the knowledge gathered in internationally recognized screening studies and trials to inform national approaches and tie them into the clinical guidelines. We must ensure that patient organizations are part of the process of policy and guideline development. We must create systems to ensure sustainable and equitable access to innovations. And we must destigmatize lung cancer through awareness, education, compassion, and dignity. Awareness between and among all stakeholders. Awareness among the population to understand what they can do to improve their opportunities for a healthy life. Awareness among clinicians, including general practitioners, to ensure that early detection happens and that patients have access to the diagnostic tests and then the treatments that they need. Awareness among health systems to ensure that those diagnostic and diagnostic tests and the treatments that are available are accessible to patients. And awareness among governments to ensure that they fully embrace their responsibility for public health and that they do what they can to ensure that the treatments that are available today are accessible to their populations, and that the treatments that are coming up in the future are also going to be available quickly for the patients who need them. We hope that our research can be the impetus for improvement for people confronting a diagnosis of lung cancer, while improving our efforts to prevent the disease from occurring in the first place. Thank you for allowing me to present the highlights of our research to you today, and let us all maximize the opportunities to breathe in this new decade. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. And where can we, did that have the details? Where
could you just show that back again?
That slide again?
Yes. This is the report, the first report that we launched on the 10th of September, which covers 11 countries. We will be republishing it with we're adding some new indicators so that these 11 countries will be republished with the next 16. This is a QR code which should link you immediately to this report. So please feel free to take a photograph. I'll get out of the way. And yeah, I don't want to break my leg. So please, if you have any trouble accessing it, please send me, my email address got moved. But anyway, it's marybussell@eiu.com. Email me, please. I'll be happy to make sure you get a copy. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Mary. So yeah, just grab a seat. So we're gonna discuss this with our panelists, discuss the findings here, and then reach out to you again as an audience. We're going to do some more polling and so on, and get some questions from you. So could I have to join us up on stage again, another distinguished panel. So Meryl Henning, who is Ambassador for Lung Cancer Europe, please take a seat. Thank you. Dolores Montserrat, MEP, so MEP and co-chair of the Environment Committee's Health Working Group. Thank you for joining us. We've heard already from interventions from the floor from Dr. Ioannis Bukovinas, if I pronounced that correctly.
Yes.
Apologies. Yes, who's a medical oncologist and president of the Hellenic Society of Medical Oncology. So again, a multi-stakeholder representation, so giving us different perspectives. So I might, you're able to stay, Dolores, but yes, great. So I might just ask you then, Meryl, to start off from, I like to start with the patient perspective from the outset. Yes. So I guess we heard a lot about the lack of patient engagement in over half of clinical guidelines. Also, I guess the experience for patients in these different countries must be markedly different as a consequence of some of these things.
Yes, it's very different, and I'm glad to speak here because I'm still alive. But most of the lung cancer patients don't get very much time in reserve. I have minions, and it is, I stole it from Matthias Scheffler, and he is also an oncologist in Germany, and he had the minions, and I loved them, and I thought it is the end of the day, so I use them. I'm an ambassador of Luce. I am a member of the Patient Advisory Board of Longkanker Nederland. It's a national patient organization. And I'm also a lung cancer patient, and I'm a Roswander. And there are different scopes to look at this report. So I want to mention all the focuses of the different organizations. But we all, in the end, we all want access to an early detection, an early right diagnosis, the right treatment, and the right care. For Luce. During the last 4 years, Luce has developed 4 reports, and they have all a different focus. We want a better understanding of the disparities in getting access to an early detection, trials, diagnosis, and treatment for lung cancer patients across Europe. But we will also want to increase the awareness about them among policymakers across Europe and other stakeholders. Collecting data and generating evidence are essential for us, for understanding which areas related to lung cancer still shows some gaps and that require action, because we can talk about it, but we require action. And which countries are still affected by the disparities. For Luce, it's important to manage the information to raise awareness at a European level, but also at a national level. We take good practices as an example of what works, and we can use the report to support the European Early Detection Programme, the screening implementation, and a better and more active engagement of patient or associations in these processes. For Longkanker Nederland, we are pleased with the report because we were always in the green. Mostly we were in the green. And we have access to the right treatment, and the research is good in comparison with other countries. We applaud the establishment of expert center in our country, because the development of lung cancer is going so quickly that we need specialized oncology, lung cancer oncologists, and not pulmonologists, but just specified for lung cancer. We wish to improve the care for patients. We want an early detection program and a very good program to quit smoking, and also a program that they stay away from smoking. So for me, raise the price of smoking with 10 euros and put the money that the government gets from that in a good program for people to not be addicted anymore. And we like to look at Sweden, how to adopt the good methods they use. As a patient with an oncogene-driven cancer, I didn't recognize myself in the report. And this report takes lung cancer as one cancer. And lung cancer is not one cancer anymore. It has several molecular subgroups, which takes another approach. The group is young and has targeted therapies with them. And so we want more use of real-world data because of the personalized medicine. The groups are becoming more rare, and therefore the real-world data is very important. And we want the follow-up studies like Bernd Johansson mentioned. The national boundaries are too narrow for us. We want cross-country clinical trials and treatment, and it should be necessary for all European citizens to have access to treatment and trials in every country in Europe. That's good.
Great, thank you very much. So, perfectly timed. So in terms of the policy things that we might put into our next kind of poll for the delegates, I got, I think, emphasis on actually identifying and quantifying some of these inequalities, particularly in early detection and some of the programs where there's a lot of differences. A more active and systematic role for patient organizations across countries. Promoting real-world data and also having cross-border collaboration on those data, on the real-world data collection and evidence generation, and also trials, and also, I suppose a separate point, is cross-border arrangements so that there's access to treatment.
Yes, because patients, through social media, patients are connected to each other.
Right.
So we know what is happening in Germany, we know what's happening in France, so we want access to that as well.
Okay, so I think that's some very specific recommendations that we can talk about. Could I move to you, Dolores, and maybe as MEP, or perhaps representing your reflections on what was found in Spain? Either way, what would you have to say about your reflections on the report?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be here. I'm not a doctor, but I was so proud because I've been Minister of Health in Spain during 3 years, and everybody is really close of cancer. My mom suffered cancer, or just 6 months ago I lost the husband of my sister. So cancer is very important for European Commission, for all the European institutions, and of course for all the state members and all the stakeholders, the patients. And now we have a big opportunity with this European plan against cancer that the Commissioner is going to present the next week, that we have to join all the stakeholders, the patients, the state members, to give hope to all the European citizens. To me, after to read this report, I have, for me, it's important 5 key areas. The first, prevention and strategic planning. The second one, early detection and innovative, high-quality standards of care. The third key, it's very important, integrated multidisciplinary care with a special attention to psychological support and oncological rehabilitation. The fourth point that, I'm really close on that because I was the minister, and it's the social policies addressing the vulnerable conditions of cancer patients and their families. We have to put policies, social policies, to help the families when they are suffering cancer. And of course, equity, the fifth key, equity in access to treatments and cure. To explain a little bit, I have 3 minutes and a half, prevention and strategic planning key area. The European Beating Cancer Plan opens up an important joint of opportunities for cancer prevention and eradication through a health in all policies approach, which seeks the systematically mainstream health in all relevant policies process. The best way to prevent cancer is through the promotion of healthy social, economic, and natural environment. That is the reason why cancer prevention touch upon our Green Deal, the farm to fork strategy, and actions for affordability of medicines, antimicrobial resistance, innovation, and research. Cardiovascular disease prevention is a successful example of what a holistic approach to primary prevention can achieve. Promoting a healthy lifestyle, healthy food and healthy environment, and integrating a mental and psychological approach to healthcare, it's very important. My view, all the strategies lack the management of emotional feelings. Who is talking about to help how to manage the feelings of the people? We are talking about don't smoke, don't drink, do a healthy life, but who is talking about the stress, the loneliness, how impacts the stress, the loneliness to our capacity to prevent disease? So we have to put inside of the prevention key all the psychological and all the manage of emotions of the patients. So in prevention, we have to include this part that a lot of state members, and I was a minister, we are not touching this part. So in prevention, for me, it's this point very important. The second important point, no, the second key, early detection and innovative high-quality standards. It's very important to implement quality standards and a system of accreditation of minimum quality care, where the hospitals will be periodical assessed. To reach these goals, we have to guarantee access to adequate resource for research and trials, fostering excellence in clinical and scientific practice. Spain, and in this report we can see it, we have a really good results in lung cancer. So it's very important to integrate all this knowledge and information. The key of social policies, this is very important. Nobody is thinking about what happens in a family when the mother of the family, or the father of the family, or the kid of the family has a cancer. Imagine that a little baby has a cancer and it's going to be in the hospital 3, 4, 2 months, and the father or the mother has to leave the job. What is going to happen to this family? The financial, the financial of this home, it's going to be less. So we have to help this family. And not just work policies, job policies, because perhaps this mother, this father, then is going to be it's more difficult to find another job, or perhaps they are going to lose to maintain that job. And in the same time, the economic, financial from this family, it's going down. So we have to put policies. In this European plan against cancer, we have to put social policies to help all the patients and all the families. And of course, we have to talk about equity in access to treatments and cure. It's true, we are in the European Union, and it's a privilege. It's a privilege to live in Europe and to have these professionals. We have these hospitals, all the research, but of course that we have inequality in access. In the same country, you can appreciate. For example, it's not the same to live in Barcelona, that you have all the hospitals, or in Madrid, or to live in the Pyrenees Mountains in Spain. That, of course, that the treatments are not the same. You have to move through 200 kilometers. Then we have to help these families with the policies, social policies, because they have to move 200 kilometers to get a hospital, to get this treatment. So this is very important, and I'm sure that in the European plan against cancer, we are going to have all these keys. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So I think there were a lot of sort of endorsing each other's views on much of it, but I think the additional things that you pressed strongly were there about the multidisciplinary team and the psychological support during care, and also the social support and dealing with the wider impacts on the family and on patients' lives beyond the care itself. Okay, so that's additional things that we can ask about. Yannis, you're a clinician now. What are your reflections? And maybe you want to give reflections on Greece and how it came out in this, but also your reflections as a clinician on the report.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be for a second consecutive year since last European Cancer Forum. I'm the current elected president of Hellenic Medical Association of Medical Oncologists. And this study done by economists provides us with the foundation to support what we did it just 2 years ago to our government. And this support is very crucial for us because for the first time, Greece is part of this economist research, and usually it is in the poor performance status countries of your research, Mary. So, as you can see, we developed a national action cancer plan for every type of cancer, and especially for lung cancer. And the priority for us is to be at the forefront of personalized cancer care. For me, the meaning now, and Meryl is an example for that, ROS1 positive disease, is that lung cancer is not one disease. It's many diseases, and we have to explore, to search, otherwise we won't find it. And this is in terms not only for medical treatment, but also for prevention. A lung cancer, a candidate lung cancer patient could have a positive family history, could be exposed to different working conditions, could be a former or current smoker. So you have to be very personalized prevention or screening detection. And of course, our geographical distribution of hundreds of islands giving much more difficulties to organize a centralized cancer plan give us also the opportunity to expand and making some networkings between different expert centers in order to foster acceleration of the diagnosis. Because this is, as Meryl said, a race against time. And in Greece, in the meaning age of 2 months from the first diagnosis till the diagnosis. And then there is a huge gap, not a time frame for referral to secondary or tertiary center. So we need to do a lot in terms of awareness in primary care physician. And since in Greece there is a strong enough private sector, we can buy services from private sector in order to succeed, to have better networking and referral to this patient. Fortunately, in Greece, we don't have the stigma of lung cancer because smoking was a daily habit. It was very routinely done in every family. Thanks to this new government we have, from the last June, there is a strong anti-smoking campaign with very nice results. Even in the nightclubs, they are not smoking. This is very new for Greek people. And of course, we will see the results very soon. From the other point of view, there is an increasing, there are increasing numbers of lung cancer of not smokers. That means there is a change in the biology of the disease through age. And this means also more money to spend on research, and not only for medical treatment, but also the biology of the disease. And if you can see in the first slide by Mary, the burden of money spent for lung cancer comparable to the other 3 big cancer killers are very low. And we did a work in Greece that the burden of different types of disease, I mean cardiovascular, neurological diseases, trauma, and others, cancer burden is the first in priorities of the society. That means we deserve to take the best majority of health budget for the treatment and prevention. And I would like to do also some specific thoughts about reimbursement of biomarkers, which are very important, and our society played a very active role in order to have it in Greece, and also education in primary and secondary schools for prevention. This is where the bad habits are starting, and we have to go to the heart of the problem, to the heart of prevention, not to wait to see young teenagers smoking e-cigarettes. That's what I think.
Okay, thank you. So again, I distill out what might be the policy asks from the Commission. I think it's come clearly, actually, I should have said it earlier, that you ensure that lung cancer is not considered as a single disease. And I guess reflecting on that from the rest of the day, that broadly actually puts scope in the plan to understand that all cancers are being redefined by these new paradigms.
Yes.
So that has to be built into whatever's put into the plan. Raising awareness, the burden of lung cancer and raising its profile amongst the cancers, I guess, is something that you would all advocate. And you reiterated a focus on prevention, because some lung cancers, anyway, contribute to that 40% of cancers that are preventable. Yeah. So those are what I get from those. So we'll keep talking, I think, but when the poll's ready, we'll just put it up, and please start voting when you see the poll, and then we can discuss the results. But do we have any questions? We didn't get an opportunity to ask Mary any questions about the report and the methods, but indeed, if you have any question for any of the panelists, so please put your hands up if you're ready. So I will go to someone who hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll come to you, sir, if that's all right. So, yeah. Oh, yes, please, yeah. Yeah, just press the talk button.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
And so I'm in the team who is preparing the Commission's cancer plan, and I would like to ask, rather provocatively maybe, why do you think that the lung cancer should be prioritized amongst other cancers? So actually when we spoke that we have around 200 cancers, and the action plan should really focus on the areas from prevention through treatment to the palliative care. Why we must prioritize exactly the lung cancer, and why it cannot be covered, like access to screening, among others, treatment, why it needs this special position within the cancer plan. And then, if I may, one technical question, if some of you would know what is the actually ratio in lung cancer in smokers or in smokers and non-smokers. If you know this figure, I would be interested to know. Thank you.
So I think that's a fair question to be asking, yeah? Anyone wants to handle it?
If I could take you back in your mind to the slide, I don't know if they can show the slide again, but the slide that lung cancer kills in Europe as many people as breast, colon, and prostate cancer combined. So you take a pie chart, you have 100%. 20%, over 20.3% of people who die of cancer will die of lung cancer. That's 1 in 5 people. I could do a simple experiment and ask people to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'd take all the number of ones away. And those would be the number of people who would die of lung cancer here in Europe. Then I would take your eye down to, actually over to the line chart that I had that showed the disability-adjusted life years and a huge discrepancy between lung cancer and the other top 3 cancers here in Europe. Then I would take you to the bar chart that was in the lower left-hand corner, sorry, I don't want to hit you, which showed the spend to disease burden. And we had prostate, colon, breast, and then lung cancer. And when it's causing such a high burden of mortality in this part of the world, I think, to me, it screams that we need to pay attention to it.
But why it cannot be integrated within the other cancers?
Well, because we have so much we need to catch up on. There's been so little spent, there has been so little dedication to the issues that it presents. And then to your other question, and I'm really glad you asked the other question because it's something that I didn't have in my slides. I usually show it, but I had a limited amount of time today. But the studies show that tobacco is implicated in cancer in general, but it has a specific burden for lung cancer. Approximately 85%, the studies say approximately 85% of lung cancer is due to tobacco use. Well, then we've got another 15% where it is not implicated in lung cancer, right? And that is the ignored minority. And so that's something we need to address. But the 85% is huge. But we never talk, and I know that when we spoke, we spoke about your experience a bit. But if somebody is diagnosed with breast, with bladder, with, I don't know, you name of a cancer, they're never asked about their smoking habits. Tobacco use is implicated in 22% of all cancers. So tobacco needs to be addressed. Yes. And in most of the countries that we studied, or actually in all of the countries we studied, I can tell you that tightening legislation on tobacco, as well as e-cigarettes, because that has been shown to be an entree into tobacco use among young people, tightening the legislation on that can help enormously. It's a low-hanging fruit in dealing with lung cancer and in dealing with all cancers. So we must address that. We must also address the lung cancer that isn't caused by tobacco use. So if I've left anything out, call me on it so I can answer more.
Okay, so there you go, right? That's a good answer?
Yes.
Okay, I don't think there's much to add to that one. Okay, so there was a question at the back over there.
Well, first, congratulations with this very nice study, Mary. The question...
Can you press the talk button?
Yes.
I can't quite...
Yeah, we cannot hear.
I don't want to miss a word which could be important in your question.
So, congratulations for your presentation. The fact is that did you also look, I give as an example, your key was mostly in the green area regarding guidelines and whatever you want. But the outcome is so far 5% behind the rest of Western Europe. Perhaps next week with Boris Johnson, after the Brexit, it will increase. I don't know. But how do you explain that they have good guidelines, everything, and worse outcomes?
I only showed you a small segment of our research. We are still cleaning the data for all of our countries. We've added, since the publication of the report in September, we are adding some new indicators to look more closely at some other things. But yes, lung cancer has a real burden for the UK. None of the countries in our studies have performed highly across the board, although it may have looked that way for the UK today because those were just the domains that I showed. So don't think that it was great everywhere. There is room for improvement everywhere.
But if I may, I think you raise a really important point, which has been touched upon by other panelists and this panel, which is that we can't rely on process measures as a measure of health system or cancer care efficacy. We really do need to look at outcomes, and there's a need for that data to be collected and analysed as well.
And that's important because the policies may be in place for the UK, but I spoke with stakeholders in Wales, I spoke with stakeholders in Northern Ireland and stakeholders in Scotland, and then stakeholders in some disadvantaged parts of England. And the situation is different. Yes. So having the policies, but making sure that they are equitably unfolded or applied, equitably applied throughout the country.
I think we have the poll ready. So do you want to put that up, and we can please keep asking questions while the poll's kind of stabilizing. If there are any more questions, otherwise we'll just wait for the poll results to come in, and then we can discuss those. Does anyone have any questions in the meantime? I have a question maybe for the clinicians. Clinician, as things get more complicated with treatments and with diagnosis, what are the implications, and maybe the patients as well, what are the implications in terms of clinical practice and how we need to organize clinical practice and the training and how patients engage when things are so confusing, possibly even to a person who's technically trained, it's confusing what's happening, and how fast it's moving, and how do we adapt the system to that, and how do we make sure that the care plan that's being promoted is flexible enough to accommodate this fast-moving environment? Do we know? I mean, do you?
Okay. I think that what we need is some expertise centers. Expertise centers are not something, the magic cornerstone or the magic bullet, but at least they can create the burden of people who are devoting to be lung cancer specialists. And covering the whole country through networkings and through different meetings or teleconferences, because nowadays MDT meeting with specialists could be done by far.
Yeah.
So it's not important to be vividly present there. So we need this expertise. We need national cancer guidelines, especially for lung cancer. We need biomarkers reimbursement. I insist on that because otherwise you won't have the benefits of innovation. We recently reimbursed Oncotype and Mammaprint for breast cancer patients in Greece. So the same happened some years ago for lung cancer specific biomarkers. Otherwise, ROS1 never could find. So we need all these pathways of having the best treatment, but you need PET-CT, you need biomarkers, you need a good surgeon, thoracic surgeon, good radio therapist and machines also, but you need MDT above all.
Right.
And this is something that Europe has the human burden to do it.
Right.
And
you
human
need
experience.
You need a good database,
Yes.
so that oncologists can look at what other cases were treated, how they were treated, and what was useful for them. And we know what's useful for us most of the time. Yeah.
The patient involvement is also key because our scientific innovations and medical developments are more complicated today than they were a generation ago. And it is really crucial that a patient understands why they're being asked to do X before they do Y, which should then be done at a different time of day than A. And if you understand the scientific rationale, then they can buy into that. And I know one year it was compliant, the next year is adherent, whatever, they can buy into the treatment regimen.
And of course, if I may add to this, all these new treatments are moving now to the early phase of the disease. I mean, we have immunotherapy in stage 3 disease. We have neoadjuvant preoperative immunotherapy implementation.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in very few time we have in adjuvant setting immunotherapy or targeted therapies accordingly to background of the patient. And that meaning that we have to calculate differently the extent of value for the patients and for the society. Treatment-free survival is one good issue to see how the patient returns to normality, returns to productivity, returns to be sexually active, to travel alone, to be happy, at least.
To be alive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We are seeing, no?
Yeah,
the
now
poll,
let's reflect on the poll, yeah.
And look, no, 52% is prevention. No? Everybody's worried about the prevention. And I think so that the European Union can provide a common framework to monitor and coordinate prevention and strategic planning measures beyond national borders, making prevention even more effective and spread. And of course, that it's very important based on this perspective, the creation of the European health data space. For example, would promote health data exchange and support new preventive strategies. So I think so that the European plan against cancer is a big opportunity to achieve what everybody's worried about, not to have this European health data space and this common framework, these common biomarkers, and all the protocols to treat all the cancers, of course, the lung cancer too. But the prevention is very important.
Yes.
What do you make? One thing that surprises me somewhat, and maybe surprise you, is that more active and systematic role for patients in policy-making processes and care is quite low.
Which one?
The active role for patients.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or for patient in the
What do you make of that?
Because I think they are not used to active lung cancer patients.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and that speaks to some of the issues that were raised in the workshops. And with in some countries where patient organizations are a new development in a country, there was a patient representative who said, oh, no, I don't want to be part of the development of clinical guidelines. I can't be part of the development of clinical guidelines. I don't have a medical background. And I said, wait, that's fine. We don't want you part of the development of clinical guidelines. We don't want you to have we don't want you, because of the fact that you don't understand the medical side of things. We've got the clinicians. We've got the nurses. We've got the dietitians. We've got all of those medical specialists there around the table who are helping to develop these guidelines. You're not part of this process for that. You're part of the process because you can help remind everyone around the table that it's your body, this is your journey, and we as health professionals are there to help you on this journey to deal with this disease. And you can let us know the impact of this disease on you, on your family, on those who are caring for you, and you can make sure that those feelings, those emotions, those experiences are fed into the development of guidelines.
Yeah, yes. And times are changing because patients are now better informed and they want an active role, and we're not used to have very active patient advocates in Europe. It's not in our culture, but we have to, and patients are now seeing it.
I'm also interested there that the patient access to cross-border treatment and trials is low. Now, I'm bearing in mind here that we ask people to select their top 3. So just because it was lower down doesn't mean it's not important, but it does suggest that people are finding it less important than the other things. So, I'd have thought that is quite a critical issue, cross-border treatment and trials and access to those. Both from the point of view of getting treatment, but also from the point of view of advancing R&D and making sure that innovative treatments keep getting developed. So again, any reflections on that?
We have a lot in this part.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why European Union can do a lot. Because I explained before that in just one country, you don't have the same equity of the access of the medicines or treatments. So imagine all around Europe. So Europe, the European Commission, the European Union, all the institutions, we have a big opportunity with the stakeholders, and for me it's very important the patients. The patients, they have to be in the plan of European cancer, in European Commission, in the Parliament, for example, in the European Parliament, in the Commission. We have to hear you because you were explaining very well. You know better which kind of social policies you need, which kind or what is not working in the prevention policies. For example, perhaps we have to do a biggest campaign against tobacco, not just 1 week during all the year. Perhaps it's better to do it like that for whatever. So the patients, they have to be, because at the end, the patients we are, all of us, all the European citizens are patients. So in cancer or in another disease. So for us, it's very important to hear, and you have to be involved, and you are one of the most important part in the future European plan and in all the policies that we are doing and we have to do around against cancer.
I think it's a very important issue, especially for countries that do not have access to these specific trials. And since I've been a European citizen by my heart, not by the law, I would like to be in a region that used to say that is fair trade and very open, very liberal, but at this point is so well protected that we lose our European identity and 2,000 years of cultural and inheritance sharing.
On this one point of cross-border collaboration on treatment and trials, I mean, it strikes me that it's going to become, talking about the complexity of cancer, not just lung cancer, but all cancers, and how they're becoming, every cancer is going to be a rare cancer. It seems to me that that's going to be absolutely critical. And as expertise has to consolidate into a few centers,
yes,
it may not be, some smaller countries may not have enough expertise within their country. So it seems to me this is going to be absolutely critical across all cancers.
Yes. But this is the reason why the European Union has the reference centers
Right.
all around Europe. To be, each reference centers, it's, the reference on this disease in Europe. So this is why it's very important, the European institutions and the European cancer to all together put the same strategy all around Europe, means all around the states members. Why? Because the competence of health has each state member. And inside of each state member, perhaps the competence of health, it has each regional government. So this is the reason why I think that it's a good idea and a good initiative to have the European plan cancer.
So any more questions or comments on those? Did anyone have a strong view or feel torn between any of these questions?
Also, real-world data collection, real-world evidence.
Yeah.
That is in the middle. I think it's very important, very, very important, because all this data generates algorithms, and algorithms come to the personalized care, and then feedback also real-world data.
Yeah.
And this is very important. Yeah. We have to invest on that.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I think some of this may be an artifact of how we've asked these questions, because clearly real-world data collection and evidence is a prerequisite for many of these things, isn't it? So it's a bit difficult to ask an either-or type of question. So that may be part of why we're getting the results like this. So any other thoughts or comments? Did you have a view on, you were talking about lung cancer, you asked this thing about lung cancer and it should be separated. Were you satisfied with that answer, or do you have a view that it should be?
I don't underestimate actually the figures which you provide us. But my question was more, what is so specific about the lung cancer that needs to be treated separately and doesn't fit within the categories of prevention of cancer in general? So actually, what if you would, for example, one of my ideas is that one of the discussion which is now going on is the population-based lung screening. We have a recommendation for the 3, so there is ongoing discussion now that there should be whether or not there should be a lung cancer suggested as a 4th one. So my point is more what you would like to see in this action plan, what cannot be covered within the other cancers in the lung. And then if you maybe can reflect on this screening, because I know that there is an ongoing discussion whether it should be recommended or not. So what are your views on this?
I think maybe let's just. I think you've made a strong point about perhaps there's parallels. So and we have discussed the whether lung cancer should be separated. So can we just focus the issue on? I think maybe we'll just focus on screening for this question, if that's okay. Yeah.
Well, I think you asked the wrong person, because if you screen, you have to screen everybody, and you have to screen them annually, because if a patient doesn't have lung cancer yet, he can have it a year after, for instance, or think, I don't have lung cancer, I get starting to smoke again. So it has to be it has to be a program, not just the screening, but also the guidance of people to quit smoking, or the guidance to make them stop, even with a good scan.
If I may add to this, when you brought up the question, this was my first reaction in your first presentation. Lung cancer screening is very controversial, but at least all the data shows that is beneficial if it is done in expertise regions or centers. This is very important. The second one is that the difference from other diseases, that is a fast-growing disease. That means a lot of breast cancer were back in the previous year mammography, or a PSA that rises very slowly gives the velocity of the disease. But the velocity of this disease is very fast. In 2 months period or in 3 months period, you go from stage 1 or 2 to stage 4. So this is another difference that we have to take into account. The third one is that it is very easy to cut the incidence of the disease by stopping cessation of the smoking. So you have preventive measures that you have to take into account. And the fourth difference is that medical innovation is very important for such diseases that has different biologies, different types of treatment, and this could be seen from a point of investment rather than treatment.
So I think we're going to have to close the session there, but I think it's been really useful to discuss that and really helpful to have these poll results. And thank you, Mary, for the EIU presentation.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you. So yeah, a warm round of applause for our panelists, and thank you so much. Thank you. Great. Yeah. Okay. Easy. Not yet. Okay. Don't worry. Yes, okay, fine, all right. Okay. So we're coming to the closing remarks, and we're actually waiting. One of the MEPs, Tomislav Sokol from Croatia, will be joining us, not quite here yet, and we'll be getting some reflections, because obviously the Croatian presidency, and also he has been the founder of the Special Committee on Cancer. So we're looking forward to helping, for him to come, and we'll kind of close up the session by asking him about what his priorities might be in that interaction. But I just wanted to myself sort of reflect on some of the themes of the day, and we'll be having a closing poll as well, and then refreshments. And also, if there's any sort of questions or comments from you when you reflect upon the day, what have you taken away from today? What have you learned from it? I hope you've come away knowing something more than what you came with, or with new ideas. So it's really an opportunity for us to discuss now. I mean, I think for me personally, a number of things have come across. This cross-border collaboration seems to me, as I've raised there, the complexity of cancer becomes greater and greater. The need for cross-border collaboration in service delivery, in data sharing, and to promote R&D and in understanding outcomes. This whole data environment seems to be critical. Do we have the top results from the polls? Can we the top 3 recommendations? So we can actually run a poll now. These are the top 3 that came from the previous polls. And again, I'd like you to, are we just choosing one or are we going to choose 3? Okay, I want you to choose your top 3 from, so these are all the polls combined so far, taking the top 3 from them, and now we want the top 3 from these. Which 3 policy measures should be the priorities for the European Cancer Plan? And don't worry, this isn't the only output that's going to come out of these 3 things that you select now. There's been a much richer discussion than that. But if you had to choose, there's only 17 of you answered. Oh, here we go, that's better. Okay. And while we're doing this, does anyone want to reflect on anything they've taken away from today that they would like to, that sort of fired them up or given them some ideas? Or wants to raise any criticisms or comments on what's been said today? All right, we're getting pretty... Okay, I think it's pretty much stabilized now. Okay. Multi-stakeholder collaboration. New reimbursement, so patient access, rapid patient access is coming up high. And promoting cancer care as an investment. All right. Okay. So that's good. Now, what about the people involved in hosting and collaborating on this conference? What do you make of the results here? Does anyone want to comment? Come on, you must be. I know it's late. Someone must have some comments here. Okay. All right, it's stopped. Okay, well, look, I think, I don't know, is the MEP here? Is you calling him? Okay. I mean, we may have to wrap up, I think, because, yeah. Unless we have any further comments, there's no sense. Oh, he's on his way? Okay, good. All right, these things happen, you know, people come late and so on. I do want to, on the reimbursement schemes, can I just ask, maybe people in the audience, what kind of reimbursement schemes have been contemplated? Do we have Bengt or any of the other economists here? Or anyone from MSD? What kind of reimbursement schemes have you found that have been able to accelerate access? You know, if we were to write a playbook, what kind of schemes would you suggest? Did someone back there suggest outcomes-based? So have you had any experience with those? And so have there been specific examples of that you could point to? And I guess what would be the prerequisites that would need to be built into a cancer plan for this to be rolled out more broadly? I mean, you need quite sophisticated data mechanisms, you need contracting arrangements, you need industry to play ball with that, and so in those cases, so what are the elements that need to be put into those sorts of schemes? Could you use the mic, sorry, so we could all.
If we go to lung cancer as an example, and we want to do targeting drugs, we know actually that 1% has only one mutation. Most patients have between 2 and 10% have between 10 and 100 mutations, and 90% have more than 100 mutations. How can we approach this with all those mutations if we want to look to targeting drugs? So that becomes very difficult. And I think if we have a very target drug, it should be specifically one mutation, one action, and not blind.
Do any of the clinicians want to comment on that? Is that a practical way forward?
So yeah, I could try to answer that. So yeah, you're right. So usually one target, one drug. That's one piece of the pie, the subgroup of patients. Patients with multiple mutations, which is often the case in lung cancer, smoking causing a lot of mutations. We tend to use immune therapy instead in these patients. They seem to. We have the question of tumor mutational burden and so on. So that, which is also a predictive biomarker in itself, even though more rough and composed of many mutations. So there are ways to rather enrichment factors than pure 100 prediction. It's more enrichment factors for different treatments.
Right. Look, I think, he's outside. Can he come in, do you think? Okay, I'm sorry about this. We just have to wait a couple of minutes. I don't want to just stretch out a conversation just for the sake of it. So if he's coming in, we'll just let's just do him the courtesy of waiting a couple of minutes for him to come in, but otherwise we will have to wrap up, I'm guessing. Please talk amongst yourselves. We're losing people. This is where maybe I should go around with a trolley of drinks or something just to keep you. I think it's only we have invited him to come and talk, so I think it's only polite to give him a little bit longer. Okay. Thank you for your patience, those of you who remained. You're very, very kind. Don't make it look like we've been waiting too long. Here we go. Thank you so much. Thank you. No, no problem at all. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you. We've got a mic here, so we do want to just grab that. So, as billed, we now have MEP Tomislav Sokol, and you're from Croatia. So I just wanted to invite you. We've had an extensive day of discussions, but I think it is important to sort of end the day with speaking to you, because I know you've been involved in the Special Committee on Cancer. And you're a founding member of it, and also that, of course, the Croatian presidency. So I'll let you get your breath. Do you want a glass of water or anything? You're okay.
I'm fine.
But I just wondered, from your perspective, from all these different hats that you wear, the fact that you're representing Croatia, and the fact that the special committee, what do you see as the priorities that you want to push with the cancer plan that's in the consultation on the cancer plan that's coming out?
Thank you very much. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I apologize for being late, but it's been a very hectic day today. I'm speaker today at four different events, 3 of them related to healthcare. So, but this is a good introduction because it really shows that healthcare is now one of the top priorities in the European Union, one of the hot topics, and it wasn't like that before. Because, as I said before, the problem with EU health policy is that we actually didn't have a health policy up until now. So we had different pieces of legislation, usually with legal basis relating to common market. We have, for instance, cross-border healthcare directive as an important piece of legislation, but which has actually been forced upon the member states by the European Court of Justice, by the Cole and Decker case law that has been evolving from 1997, 1998, etc., which in the end kind of forced the hand of the member states to go with, and the Commission to go with the directive in 2011. So we kind of have this different piecemeal legislation. So one of them is cross-border healthcare directive. We have social security coordination regulation, which deals also with cross-border healthcare. We have the Transparency Directive from 1989. We have the pharmaceutical legislation, etc., etc. So we have these different things, but now we have the first time the chance to actually have a common European strategy, to have a common system on what actually we want to do on the horizontal levels, to be kind of underlining all the policy areas of the European Union. So different issues which are very important. So I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to hear about what was discussed before. But if we speak in terms of presidency, if we speak in terms of concrete files, I think health technology assessment regulation will be the crucial piece of legislation. I think the trialogues are already going on, and I think that is very important because definitely national healthcare systems in the European Union are national systems. So according to Article 168 of the treaty, member states have the competence and power to concerning financing and management and organization of healthcare systems, and this creates different frameworks in different member states. For instance, in the UK, health technology assessment with the cost effectiveness analysis is legally binding upon the National Health Service, and they have to provide funding for it. And they have a clearly defined criteria, benchmarks, quality adjusted life years as one of the crucial issues, etc. So this, and for instance, in my country, in Croatia, you only have this kind of health technology assessment done for drugs, for medicines, which when it is determined whether they will be placed on the list of National Health Insurance Fund, but that's more or less it, and there are no clear criteria in this sense. So I think on the European level, this will be one of the crucial files. In terms of general priorities of the Croatian presidency, so one will definitely be organ transplant, because organ transplant is very important for Croatia. We've kind of been one of the leading countries in some areas like liver transplant, and that's also, of course, related to cross-border healthcare, and oncology within the context of aging. So if aging societies increased costs related to aging, and of course oncology is one of the main issues in that sense. So definitely also battle against cancer will be one of the issues very high on the agenda of the Croatian presidency. So that's the presidency part. As you can imagine, since the procedures that you have, when you are within the council, you kind of dependent on the files that you already have, which have been initiated by the Commission, gone through the Parliament, etc. So it's hard to initiate new policies in that sense, especially new concrete legislative pieces of legislation. But I think in more general terms, if we speak on the cancer plan on the EU, there are definitely some things that are very important for me. I can,
Yes, sure. And while you're talking, I wonder if my colleague, we've been running polls through the day on policy priorities that our group felt they want to put. So while you discuss those, I think we'll just try and get those up, and you might want to reflect on what,
okay, that will be
So
very interesting.
Could we put that? Yeah, but carry on. Yeah.
Please. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you talk about your priorities.
Okay. So. Okay,
let's have yours before we.
No, but this is interesting because this is what I wanted to actually stress, that financing is the crucial issue, and difference, especially in terms of differences in access to healthcare in different member states, I think are the issue that we will have to tackle, because if you look at health outcomes, if you look at survivorship in terms of cancer, so. If you look, for instance, at pediatric cancer, there is a 20% difference in survivorship across different member states. So first, access to healthcare and health outcomes are extremely different in different member states, and actually health outcomes more or less reflect the difference in healthcare funding. And of course, since 77% of healthcare funding in the EU is public spending, then again, we have the crucial issues again, national health insurance funds, social security institutions, etc. And of course, the problem here is that there is no harmonization. That Article 168 definitely excludes possibilities for EU to harmonize national systems. So the question is, what can EU do to actually help member states provide the best access to healthcare and funding to most expensive drugs, treatments, etc., etc., etc. So I think that will be one of the crucial issues. And I have actually some ideas in that sense. And first concerns most expensive treatments. Because I think if you look at and I'll be a bit provocative here, if we can, as the European Union, spend so much money on the Green Deal, which is of course important, I don't see why, for instance, member states, European Union couldn't create or start thinking of creating a common European fund, for instance, of financing most expensive drugs, especially for orphan diseases, for rare diseases, rare treatments, etc. So I think that is definitely one area where we should look at, because EU in general has two types of instruments: one regulatory and financial. And of course, we have some regulatory priorities, already mentioned HT, etc. But without financing part, it will all come down to what I mentioned in one of my articles, is that European Union essentially tells national healthcare systems what to do with their own money. And I don't think that's a good relationship. And because if you look in terms of financing, so one important area which can be used is cohesion policy, especially in terms of reducing disparities between different parts of Europe. And you know that currently we have a multi-annual financial framework which is being discussed. There are big differences between different member states. Net payers want cohesion policy to be reduced. Other countries like Croatia want it to be to stay at least on the same level. So this will be one of the key challenges, because EU cohesion policy is very important in terms of funding infrastructure. But not just buildings, also for instance, instruments and technology within hospitals. Actually, in Croatia, 80% of public spending is financed from the cohesion policy, and big percentage of this goes to healthcare. Also, all new specializations. So specialization. So after you finish medical school to get a specialization, which is financed by the state, all new specializations are financed from the European Social Fund, which is obviously very important for us because of the brain drain of our doctors going to work in the UK, Germany, France, etc. Without this funding, our healthcare system couldn't function. So I think cohesion policy should be put very high in the agenda of financing. The other area which is also connected to this is the European semester. Because if you look at the influence of EU on national health policies, you can see that this impact has been neutral in some cases, but also negative in some other. Because European semester, especially 4 or 5 years ago, through country-specific recommendations, was usually focused on fiscal responsibility and austerity. And one of the instruments for achieving this was reduction of healthcare spending. And this was, of course, a very big problem for the affected member states, because the reduction of healthcare spending meant less investment into infrastructure, less salaries for medical doctors, nurses, etc., who then traveled to other member states, etc. So this is definitely also, so I'm glad that this European semester is changing now.
So that speaks to maybe number 3 there, which is about seeing spending.
I think as an investment, not a cost. Yes, because now in the last 2 or 3 years, within the European semester, we actually, for the first time, we have healthcare goals as an end in itself. So not as a means to achieve better fiscal discipline, etc., but actually health outcomes as something which is in itself important.
Yes, you don't need to justify it any further, I guess.
Of course, because the problem of the EU, because the EU has this constitutional symmetry, that most important competences and powers of the European Union are in the area of market, market financing, etc. And now the idea of putting healthcare high on the agenda, a battle against cancer, as the kind of the flagship, that's politically very important. And the last thing, of course, is Horizon, investment into Horizon Europe. Because one of the key areas also mentioned here, I think it's on the second place, is investment into R&D. And putting battle against cancer as one of the 5 missions with clear objectives, clear benchmarks, etc., of the Horizon Europe program, I think is of crucial importance. Because in general, in terms of R&D, we are definitely lagging behind countries like the US, even China, for instance. And it's very important to make this funding as much as available as possible, especially because in terms of medicine, investment into research into medicine, you know that without basic fundamental research, you cannot do anything. And fundamental research is usually not financed by the industry because, you know, it's pretty far away from commercialization. So here, because if we in Croatia, we have a strong movement by some, let's say, parts of the industry saying, yeah, but you don't need to finance fundamental research. It cannot be applied. It's just waste of taxpayers' money, etc. So I think we need European Union to really step in, because without fundamental research, we cannot have applied research. And then the other question, which is even a bigger problem, that's the commercialization of research. So how to turn this basic research finance from taxpayers into something that can be commercially viable, into patents, etc., etc. And I think we definitely have very rigid system, European Union, especially in terms of state aid rules. So it's very hard for startups, scale-ups, etc., to get funding in that sense. So I think we should definitely look into that direction as well. So I mean, the bottom line is that the EU's cancer plan should definitely be horizontal. It should look at in the area of state aid, in the area of internal market, regulation, financing, cohesion policy, prevention, which I haven't mentioned, which can also be.
Yes, we've got that there.
It's one of the most important areas, especially because one out of four cancers now today in Europe are preventable. So I think this is something that should definitely be a wide horizontal policy, with the support from the top policy level. I think that's crucial. This is something that we'll definitely opt for here in the European Parliament as well.
One of the themes that's come up a few times is around data, generating data, real-world data, and being able to share it across borders and so on. Is that something specifically that you think the plan will be looking at, or that you would be advocating?
Definitely, of course, one of the, I have to say, again, maybe I'll be a bit provocative there. I think I'm definitely in support. You have two values which are at stake here. One is obviously the exchange of data. We have the ERNs, European Reference Networks, which are already conducting this exchange of data, which are based on the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive from 2011. But on the other hand, you have, I think, if I may say, very rigid rules on data protection and the famous GDPR, right? So I think you have this kind of two values that need to be balanced. So on one side, you have the necessity to exchange data, to use it, especially the metadata, to predict certain outcomes out of this, etc. And on the other hand, you have data protection. So finding a right balance between these two is, I think, will be the real challenge.
Do you think there'd be special exceptions to GDPR in the case where you're trying to improve healthcare outcomes, or how might that balance be struck? Is it simply by changing the risk assessment concept, or is it a more kind of specific? If it's healthcare, then maybe there's some tunnels.
I'm a lawyer. I
Okay, so you're the right person to ask.
I teach health.
Don't get too technical.
Yeah, I teach health law at the university. Actually, I did my PhD at K11 here in Belgium on cross-border healthcare. And as a lawyer, I'm definitely not in favor of many exceptions. I think that's not a good approach, because if you have too many exceptions, then the whole system collapses. Right. So I'm definitely generally not in favor of this, but this is something that should definitely be looked into. I cannot go more into detail now, but sector-specific exceptions, technically and methodologically, I think it's not really the best.
So it's more a re-evaluation of the risk-benefit across the... Okay. Any questions from the floor for our colleague here? No? Okay. Any other reflections on what we've... This is a very short list from a lot of discussion, obviously, and a lot of polling today. So I think maybe just some closing thoughts on any of these.
I think actually we covered most of these. I think even all of these issues that are mentioned here, even though I have to say I only look at the first 2 or 3 ones. I didn't have time to scroll, but I think that this reflects the problems, and there is a common understanding and a consensus of the issues and challenges that are ahead. So I think that's kind of. We all know what are the problems. We even know what to do. It's the case of finding the political will to do it. But I think now we have a real chance. I think it was already started in the electoral campaign for the European Parliament. So this whole issue, I'm glad that the new Commission President and the new Commissioner really took it over. And I think, and now I think it's the crucial thing is to really engage with the policymakers in drafting and finding concrete solutions. But there will be definitely a lot of politics here, especially in terms of funding, but we should definitely work on that. And not to see, and that's what maybe my closing thought, not to see healthcare as an expense, only as an expense, but really an investment in terms of better quality of life, of more productive people working even in the economy, etc. So to really look at this as something positive, and to look at the health and good quality of healthcare as a value in itself. So I think that's the change of paradigm that we need on the level of the EU institutions.
Okay, well, that's a fine way to close. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for just holding on just a few minutes while we were waiting for...
And again, I apologize for being late, for having to stay here, but today is, as I said, really hectic. So,
okay, so, well,
sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you indeed. And thank you to all of you for a really rich day and for interacting so very much. Now, I think there are some refreshments outside which you well deserve, so thank you very much indeed.